Hi there, welcome back to my channel. Lately, I've been procrastinating terribly on making videos, so the footages that you see now were actually filmed a month ago. Nothing in particular, but I guess I was just being a slacker. Anyway, enough for my excuses. This time, I went to Southern Balkans, which includes Albania, Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Greece. I know most people wouldn't recognize Greece as part of the Balkan countries, but geographically speaking it is. In fact, one of the motivations behind Greece's expansion in the 12th century is that the Balkan regions like Macedonia and Thrace are its backyard. Although historically, the Greeks had their communities throughout the Balkans, the Black Sea coast, and Turkey, they had never dominated those regions. On the contrary, Greece was continuously under the control of its strong neighbors. Well, the more contemporary reason why the Greeks don't consider themselves part of the Balkans is of course socio-economical. Greece has been an EU member since the 80s, a NATO member since the 50s. The only people in Greece with significant cultural similarities with the Balkans are Northern Greeks, representing less than 30% of the population. The rest of Greece are more associated with Mediterranean countries like Italy and Cyprus. The Balkans usually don't come top of your list when you plan your next vacation, but I think it deserves more attention. It's a good opportunity if you want to see for yourself how the news media doesn't always reflect the reality. Long stigmatized as the center of gangs and human trafficking, the Balkan countries are actually very safe. Maybe too safe, I would say. But again, we're talking about a region that never short of tensions and conflicts. During my stay in Kosovo, a new round of conflict had just unraveled along the border with Serbia. It won't take you much effort to see why this country is still mentally divided. Right when the bus entered the perimeter of Pristina, there was a giant Albanian flag flying over a plaza. But 20 minutes later, at a small town called Gračanica, a Serbian flag was raised right in front of the police station. While the war of flags is still ongoing, what I found interesting is that both sides seem to have a crush on the American and European flags. And not just flags, but American presidents like Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, not necessarily popular in the US, are hailed as heroes in Kosovo. Travel tips: be smart and be flexible. Checking Google Maps isn't always as useful as asking the locals. Sometimes the only source of truth comes from the mouth of the lady at the bus terminal. And also, be patient. Restaurant service may be slow, stores may be closed in the middle of the day. It is a bit of a learning curve for a control freak like me. But after a day or two, I started to love the fact that I'm not checking the time on my phone every 5 minutes. From a visitor's point of view, all the Southern Balkan countries have their fair share of brutalist architectures, communist past, and reckless driving. Indeed, when I look at the photos I took, I can't really tell which one is from where. However, I would argue that such similarities can be misleading, because underneath the surface, each country still retains a lot of its quirks. Look at this traffic light in Tirana. I bet the traffic designer must have been angered by the driver's smartphone addiction. Speaking of cars, here in Albania, you will see Mercedes everywhere. It has to do with the long history of Mercedes being the de facto sedan for government officials and privileged individuals. The buses and minibuses in Albania are not as fancy, but unlike in any other countries I visited, Here you pay the driver when you get off the bus instead of when you get on. I mentioned the flag color overdose in Kosovo. In fact, since last year, all the supermarkets, big and small in Kosovo, has to put on their product labels the name and flag of the country of origin. Is this some kind of public awareness campaign, or is it just to make people feel that they're part of the international community? I asked the locals what's the point, but no one seems to know. The quirkiest of all countries during my trip has to be North Macedonia. North Macedonia is the only country that got independence from Yugoslavia without shedding a single drop of blood. But the relative peace in this country doesn't make it boring in any way. On the contrary, Skopje, the capital city, is the weirdest among all the places I visited this time. Look, there's a pirate ship in the middle of the river, and look, there's a London double-decker bus. 100 years ago, just the word Macedonia would give many European politicians headache. After the Ottoman Empire dissolved, what's today North Macedonia was carved into three parts by its neighbors. Until Macedonian nationhood was sort of invented by Tito in 1946. I use the word invented because there were people who identified themselves as Macedonians. They live in a region called Macedonia, but the concept of a Macedonian nation had never crossed their mind. Even after the Macedonian question was settled and Macedonia formally declared independence in 1991, the country continued to have trouble with its own identity. Both Greece and Bulgaria claim to be the heir of the ancient Macedonians. Disputes on names and dialects have been settled mostly by concessions made by Macedonia. Given this cultural grief, for lack of a better word, it's not difficult to understand why the Macedonian government propped up so many garish and pointless statues around Skopje. And of course, this also has to do with corruption. Let's set the history aside and talk about something less heavy. I think what draws a lot of travelers to the Balkans is the budget friendliness. The price of food, hotel, and public transport was such a relief from the high inflation in Europe. This is especially true in Kosovo because they use euro as their currency. A spaghetti in Pristina costs like 4 euros. A coffee is 50 cents. And a 4-star hotel is only about 40 euros per night. As travel expenses rise in most European countries, the Balkan countries are seeing double-digit increase in the amount of tourists. Albania seems to be the biggest beneficiary of this trend. Although Tirana, the capital city, is starting to get a little more attention, it's still pretty much under the radar. A good meal with beer or wine costs around 20 euros. One night at a 4-star hotel is about 60 to 70 euros. I know cost saving may not be your priority, but man, I just love the fact that a little money can go such a long way. Another observation. In Europe, a good indicator of a country's cost of living is the price of a basic goods like a bottle of beer. A beer in Kosovo costs about 1 euro, while the same beer may cost triple in the Netherlands. But if you want to compare the cost of living as a tourist, namely restaurants, hotel, and car rentals, you should pay attention to the price of a cocktail, which is considered a premium, something extra. Along my trip, I started from a cocktail priced around 6 to 7 euros and went lower in Kosovo and North Macedonia. The price of a beer in Greece is not much higher, but cocktail was another story. It went from 9 to 10 euros in the mainland to around 20 euros in Mykonos. I knew everything in Mykonos would be expensive, but I was still taken aback when I saw the menu. Anyway, I didn't buy any cocktail in Mykonos, but I think it gives you a good idea of how much your money is worth in that place. I know I was kind of brushing off Mykonos as this overpriced tourist trap. In fact, I do find the island quite fascinating. Not for its nightclubs or beaches, but how tourism can essentially divide a place into two. When I walked past the iconic windmills, the cobbled streets, and went uphill a bit further, I thought I was in American suburbia. There's no sidewalk, just cars racing by and big empty lots. I know I'm being cynical about it, but I really think Mykonos lack a bit of authenticity. A guy at the hotel reception told me that the people who work on this island put together a price system for themselves. A cocktail that normally costs 18 euros would only cost 5 if you show your hotel employee badge. Most people working on the island are not here for long because of the cramped living space and pace of work. In this respect, I find Athens to be a good example where everything good and bad is mixed together. It has a lot to do with the strict zoning and height restrictions enforced by the city. If you go up the Lycabettus Hill, which I highly recommend, you will see how the city is humbled by the Acropolis. After all, the wisdom of ancient Athens is all about achieving the right scale, both for human and for architecture. The museums and relics in Athens are some of the best ones I've visited. The items are well illustrated and the layout makes aesthetic sense. Besides the Acropolis Museum, I would also recommend visiting the Museum of Cycladic Art, as well as the site of Aristotle's Lyceum. They're equally amazing and has less people. It was quite a long journey for me, and I had a lot on my mind when I was flying back. After Yugoslavia broke up 30 years ago, a few countries in the Balkans managed to get themselves a new identity, like becoming an EU or NATO member. But others, like Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, are still struggling. In some way, they're stuck in the nation building and modernization process. If the recovery of the Balkans are a social project, I think it's one that's still left unfinished. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time.